Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Disney and Pixar's Ratatouille, which was released in the United States on June 22, 2007. This CGI animated film was directed by Brad Bird, who also wrote the film. It was produced by Brad Lewis. The co-writers were Jan Pincava and Jim Capobianca. The music was composed by Michael Giacchino. The cinematography was handled by Sharon Callahan and Robert Anderson. It was edited by Darren T. Holmes and Stan Webb, and it starred the voices of Patton Oswalt, Lou Romano, Brad Garrett, Ian Holm, Janine Garofalo, Brian Dennehy, Peter Zone, Peter O'Toole, Will Arnett, Julius Callahan, James Remar, John Ratzenberger, Teddy Newton, Tony Fucile, Jake Steinfeld, Brad Bird, Stefan Roux, and Thomas Keller. This film was released back when I was a high schooler of only 15 years old, and back then I was quite skeptical of how Western animation was faring back in those days, because my interests were mainly gearing towards anime, and from that time I was a little bit on the skeptical side and quite cynical back then. And I wasn't even so sure how my initial reactions with Ratatouille were going to be, though I did hear a lot of really great to good things about this film. A lot of people praise this film in its entirety, while others say that it was a really good film, and others just said that it was a good film in general. It wasn't until that I started watching this film in its entirety just this year did I manage to find it quite enjoyable, and overall, I found it to be a very good film. Make no mistake that I really love Pixar, and if you've seen my reviews of Toy Story 3, Inside Out, and The Good Dinosaur, then I definitely love this particular animation company because what they managed to pull off is works with a lot of heart and a lot of soul added into it with really likable characters. Going into the story of Ratatouille, we are introduced to a young rat by the name of Remy who has a very unique gift of taste and smell. In terms of those heightened senses, he's able to detect what type of flavors are found in these certain foods, and he's able to detect whether certain items are poisoned or not. He lives in a small farm in the rural side of France with his father, Django, and his older brother, Emile, where they manage to be quite the scavengers. It's not until one fateful day that he gets introduced by a cooking program hosted by Chef Auguste Gusteau, where he gets totally immersed in the world of cooking. Come one stormy day during a scuffle between Remy, Emile, and an old lady, where they make a dash of freedom, where they manage to still be chased by her, and they try to escape, but Remy loses sight of his family and friends until he gets drafted to the sewers of Paris, and ultimately the city of Paris, where he meets a lot of different characters, including Alfredo Linguini, who is basically a poor, hapless chap who manages to find himself being the garbage boy. Their friendship is definitely something that makes this film shine. And even though there are some elements of the story that are not totally groundbreaking nor too exciting, this film manages to do itself good by having its trademark Pixar charm and really lovable characters. However, despite some of those praises I could give this film, there are definitely some head scratchers. How did Remy get his heightened sense of taste and smell? How was it inherited by him? Did his mother have that too? Did any of his family members have that as well? And what about the fact that he was able to control Alfredo Linguini using his hair by manipulating his every movement while slicing and dicing certain vegetables or just generally cooking in the kitchen. How does he manage to do all of these things? Well, I guess you could say it's supposed to be a suspension of our disbelief, which it does pretty well, but at times it left me with questions here and there. So even though there were some plot holes, albeit not too egregious, this film manages to do itself well in terms of its charm and heart, and the likability of the story and the charm that it manages to have, and the absolute lovability and that warm feeling that I managed to get with Ratatouille manages to hold itself up really, really well. And leave it up to Pixar to have some of the finest pieces of animation ever. Now, I really love the animation found in Ratatouille, especially considering the fact that they managed to get every detail of what makes Paris a very idyllic and very artistic city. I know a lot of my French friends may not always agree with me on this, but this is definitely something that the animators and the people who've done their homework managed to really get out of this particular city. Now, when we see the movements of the chefs, of how they prepare the food, it is just so glorious that it makes me want to jump in the screen and pretty much be a customer at Gusteau's fabulous restaurant. And the character designs are quite well done, even though they come off as a little bit cartoony for certain people's tastes. But it's Pixar, and they managed to really do something great with their animation, which is vibrant, colorful, and bursts with life. My favorite parts of the animation definitely have to be the food tasting moments, where we get introduced to either Remy or Emile trying out certain pieces of food, whether it be cheese and some piece of fruit, and when they combine it together, it is just a great piece of work just found in that said moment. So I am not going to mince words here. You have to leave it up to Pixar to really concoct something as grand and vibrant as their trademark animation, which does not disappoint in any shape or form. The music is another great highlight of what makes this film really, really good. You really have to give it to someone like Michael Giacchino, who composed such really fine pieces of music. And the one piece of music that stood out to me was Le Festin, sung by the fabulous French singer Camille, whose girlish and smoky timbre managed to really make the song lively, sweet, and absolutely charming. The characters are really lovable all throughout, even though there were some characters that could have used a little bit more development. Remy and Linguini are the definite stars of the film. So I'll start off with Remy, who, as I stated before, has a godlike gift of taste and smell, and he uses those heightened senses to detect certain flavors, certain textures, and certain nuances of what these certain foodstuffs have. In terms of his personality, Remy is likable all throughout. What makes him likable, you ask? Well, what about the fact that he is quite ambitious, very outgoing, and really, really goal-oriented as a character? He has a strong passion for food and for life in general, and he just loves to try out new things, and he just loves to go out there in the city and really make something of himself because that's what he loves to do. Yes, we've seen these type of characters before, and Remy is also your typical underdog because even though he has all of these extraordinary gifts at his disposal, he kind of gets underestimated by in terms of how they looked at him. But he's still a very likable character, and his moments on screen are definitely a lot of fun to watch. Linguini is yet another catalyst in terms of this film, and the relationship that Remy and Linguini have are the absolute core of what really makes this film stand out in its own special way. You really get to see this chemistry with Remy's idealistic, ambitious nature combined with Linguini's clumsy and sort of loser like characteristics all coming into play, and their personalities are a definite symphony of a lot of great moments and a lot of heart. Yes, he is your typical loser character, the one who's constantly awkward, the one who constantly slips up, and the one who is constantly the butt of almost everyone's jokes. But despite those said tropes, he still has a lot of likability and a lot of relatability to be found in this particular character. Because there are definitely moments where we were like Linguini in terms of how awkward we tended to be, in terms of how we try to find the right words, but for some reason couldn't really get to that. And there are times where he does struggle from time to time, and then comes Remy to give him a little bit of a boost of what he can really do. Yes, Remy does control him in terms of how he manages to make him maneuver all of his handiwork and how he cuts vegetables and how he handles food in general, but you cannot deny that there is a strong chemistry found between these two characters, and these two are definitely the bread and butter of what really makes this film stand out in its own special way through its heart. Chef Auguste Gusteau is a very fun character all throughout, and even though he passed away during the first part of the film, his ghost serves as a mentor to Remy in a very fun and entertaining way. His character is not preachy, nor does he need to constantly be on a soapbox to spread his every message. He just needs to be down to earth, charming, and he's just a lot of fun, especially considering that Remy does talk to a lot of his images throughout the film, and they just bounce off of each other brilliantly. Colette is a very good character, even though there are times that her first moments does perceive her to be kind of bitchy, but in the later part of the film, she does seem to have a little bit of a warm and gooey side, which might come out of nowhere, but she's still a pretty good character in her own rights, mostly because she is a tough character who has to survive in this man-dominated world of the culinary arts, and she wants to prove herself to be better than every man in the kitchen, and she does have her moments of genuine spunk and vivacity, and it's all backed up in terms of how she is as a character. She is quite entertaining on screen. However, if there is one moment that I don't really care for, it's the tacked on romance between Linguini and Colette. Yes, they're meant to be colleagues, but sometimes I felt like the romance that these two have was a little bit on the tacked on side. Mostly because I didn't really feel too much chemistry with these two as opposed to the friendship that Remy and Linguini have. But despite those said issues, Colette is a very entertaining character, even though I could have loved to have a little bit more of a genuine development with her character in particular. Skinner is the designated villain of this film, and his presence does come off as over the top and quite loony, but at the same time, that over the top nature and that slightly loony nature comes from the fact that he runs the show and he wants to promote all of these pre-packaged goods that he passes off as done by Gusteau's. He is a generally fun character to watch, what with his constant physical slapstick moments and the times where he can be gloriously over the top. But as a villain, he is kind of underwhelming, and he's not generally the most threatening villain I have ever seen, but he's still entertaining all throughout. He's not the best villain, but he's quite an entertaining character. Then we go to Django, who serves as the traditional minded father of Remy and Emile, And he does come off as the typical Papa Wolf who wants to make sure that his sons just stay safe and follow his every rule because he knows what it feels like to be in the human world, especially in terms of the revelation he gives to Remy. Now, while his character isn't really that deep, he's still a very entertaining character with his tough, gruff nature, and even though he's not Father of the Year, he's still an okay character. I would have loved to have a lot more heart with this particular character, but as he is, he's pretty good. Not the best character I've ever seen in terms of father figures, but not the worst either. Emile is just a lot of fun. Now, while he does come off as kind of goofy and a little bit on the simple-minded side, he still manages to be a very good foil to Remy's more ambitious and fiery nature. Emile is a little bit more on the laid-back side, but at the same time, he is quite doubtful and quite concerned of how his younger brother will make it through these entirely crazy new things. He's definitely a good big brother to Remy, and their chemistry as brothers is quite believable as their personalities really do bounce off of each other. He's not the deepest character, nor is he the most complex, but he's still a good character all throughout. Then you have the other characters like Horst, Lalo, Larousse, Mustafa, Talon Labart, and Pompidou. Out of these characters, I definitely love Horst, as he has to be one of the most entertaining characters ever. And he's also quite a badass. Colette basically states that Horst has done some time in prison, mostly due to charges that he kinda made up. One notable feat that he claims to have done was killed a man using his thumb. And that line alone was quite hilarious. And the joke is mainly supposed to come from the fact that even though Horst is this tough guy on the outside who has a very stone cold glare, he still manages to be quite hilarious in terms of the lines that he has to deliver. Talon Labart basically comes off as this slimy, sleazy lawyer of Skinner, and his presence on screen definitely just makes you want to spit at this guy's face, mostly because of just how smug he is. And we even have other likable characters, even though they don't really get that much time to develop on screen, like Git, who is this burly, muscle-bound rat who basically serves as the strong guy of Emile's group of friends. And even though his character isn't really that deep in particular, he's still quite entertaining. So overall, the characters may not be the most fleshed out nor the most unique, but they're quite entertaining in their own special ways, and they're a lot of fun to watch on screen, especially considering the relationship that Remy and Linguini have as friends. And the voice acting, as to be expected from any Pixar work, is very stellar. We have Patton Oswalt, who managed to give Remy his signature enthusiasm, charm, and overall lovability. It should come as no surprise that during one of his stand-up comedy routines, that the director saw that he could definitely be a perfect fit to Remy, mostly due to the fact that he had some food-related jokes squeezed into his stand-up comedy routine. And for that, he managed to bring Remy to life with his vibrance, charm, and his signature enthusiasm for food, life, and just a lot of great things in general. He managed to find a lot of these nuances, and he makes sure that Remy does not become completely overbearing, and he manages to find a lot of great moments of likability with Remy. Lou Romano does a very fine job with Alfredo Linguini's brand of clumsiness, klutziness, and overall awkwardness throughout the entire film. And he manages to give Alfredo Linguini his signature awkward youth voice, coupled with a thirst for life, a thirst for trying to prove himself to be better than what he used to be, and he just gives him his overall charm and likability. And both Romano and Oswald manage to bounce off of each other perfectly. Janine Garofalo managed to give Colette her sass and her overall wit, making her character come alive in terms of just how entertaining she is. And she just does a very fine job in making Colette an entertaining and very fun and quite an interesting character when all is said and done. Ian Holm does a very fine job with Skinner's maniacal personality, and he does Skinner well in terms of his Napoleonic complex and in terms of trying to be the man who runs the show in this entire shebang. Brad Garrett's signature basso voice does serve the role of Auguste Gusteau wonderfully. He's able to make Chef Gusteau a very fatherly figure, and he just manages to have a lot of fun with this particular character. One character that I really also want to talk about and whose voice actor that I definitely enjoy listening to is definitely the stone cold, no holds barred, I don't take crap critic Anton Ego, voiced by the late great Peter O'Toole. And let me just tell you that out of all the characters in this particular film, Anton Ego is the one that definitely strikes me the most. And I am not going to spoil what happens to him at the end, because there are times that I found his climax a little bit more on the sporadic side, instead of giving him a lot more time to be fully fleshed out of what made this character the way he is. But despite that issue, I still have to say that Anton Ego is definitely a great character in his own special way, mostly because he knows how to use his acid dripping tongue in order to spout out some pretty harsh critiques, but at the same time, just be as honest with himself as possible. And the monologue that he manages to say at the end of the film, which I dare not spoil as you need to watch for yourself, is quite riveting in terms of how I feel as an online critic, and I'm sure that it will definitely touch a lot of online critics in many ways that they've never felt before. And Peter O'Toole manages to give his fine bass baritone voice in terms of really making this character come alive. He manages to make Anton quite threatening and at the same time quite chilling in his own special way, thanks to that cool bass baritone voice which he manages to give off with such aplomb and such vivacity. And you could definitely feel those chills run down your spine every time Anton Ego enters the screen, all thanks to the late, great Peter O'Toole providing his voice. John Ratzenberger does a very fine job with Mustafa's fun-loving personality. Teddy Newton does the role of Talon Justice in terms of making this character quite sleazy and slimy. Tony Fucile as Pompidou is just a lot of fun to listen to. Jake Steinfeld gives Git his big guy personality. Will Arnett gives Horst his badass nature, but at the same time manages to make him quite hilarious. Brian Dennehy does the role of Django well in terms of giving him his signature Papa Wolf nature. Peter Zone does a very great job in terms of making Emile a very fun-loving, slightly goofy, but a very good brother type of personality to Remy, and he manages to be very entertaining all throughout. And we even get some really good performances done by Julius Callahan, James Remar, Brad Bird, Stefan Roux, and Thomas Keller. So overall, Ratatouille is a genuinely good film, mostly due to the fact that it has a lot of heart and soul added to this particular film, and as to be expected, Pixar's animation is really top-notch. So with that said, I give Ratatouille a well-deserved 4 out of 5 stars. There are some elements that need to be bumped up a little bit, like making the characters a little bit more on the deeper side and making them a lot more fleshed out. But despite those said issues, which are quite few and far between, the overall execution is just so well done. And if you haven't seen this film yet, please go check it out. And for those of you who have seen Ratatouille, what did you think of it? Did you really love it? Did you feel meh about it? Did you not care for it? Please comment below and let me know. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in later where I take a look at its ripoff from Video Brinquedo, Ratatouille. Yeah, that is gonna be quite a trip to reckon with. But until then, have a great day, everybody, and just pray for me that I won't lose my mind with Ratatouille.